The fleet hovered above Earth, and Commander Zorith could hardly suppress a smile. This was a momentous day, the beginning of humanity's long overdue reckoning. For millennia, their primitive species had lingered, barely scraping by on a broken planet, struggling to survive among the stars. Zorith, a seasoned leader of the Zorthian Empire, had faced countless species in his time, and not a single one had posed a challenge to the might of the Zorthian forces. Humans were no different. Weak, volatile, and incapable of uniting even when threatened with extinction, they were a curiosity at best, an easy conquest at worst. Earth's defenses were laughable at best. Their military forces were outdated, their technology primitive. Zorith had scouted their every weakness, catalogued their failures, and was now prepared to wipe the slate clean. The humans would bow to their new overlords, or they would perish, just as all other lesser species had before them. Zorith's fingers tapped rhythmically against the polished command console, his eyes scanning the transmission data from their fleet. Thousands of Zorthian ships, sleek and imposing, stretched across the void of space, surrounding the planet like an inescapable cage. The humans won't last long, Zorith thought smugly. They've had their time. It's ours now. Behind him, his officers moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their gazes fixed on the various data streams and holographic readouts. They had been briefed. Their strategy was simple: subdue Earth quickly, disable all military capabilities, and leave the population to rot. The resistance, if any, would be crushed without hesitation. Zorith's gaze flickered toward the holodisplay, showing live footage of the surface. The humans were still oblivious, scurrying about their business, unaware of the impending destruction. They were a species of such irony. Their cities glittered with lights and structures, symbols of progress, and yet they lacked the foresight to understand how fragile their existence truly was. There were strange habits, though, that baffled him. For instance, the humans had a peculiar attachment to their emotions. He had watched their leaders speak at summits, and it was as if they believed that words could end wars or foster peace. Emotions, fear, anger, joy, drove them, and yet these emotions were nothing more than a weakness. Zorith could hardly comprehend how such volatile creatures had managed to survive this long. "Commander," one of his officers, Lieutenant Zern, spoke up, his voice wavering with uncertainty. "There's something strange happening on Earth. We've intercepted messages. They seem to be organizing? It's a primitive form of resistance, but I don't understand. Why haven't they collapsed under our assault?" Zorith dismissed the concern with a sharp gesture, his arrogance showing. "Let them organize. It won't make any difference. We've already broken their military. This is their last stand." He chuckled darkly, amused at the thought. "Perhaps they'll send a few ragtag fighters to their doom. We'll wipe them out, and then they will understand their place in the galaxy." His superior officer, General Zar, a massive figure clad in dark exo-armor, stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "Commander, you're certain about this? We've faced less determined species, but these humans, they're strange. They fight differently." Zorith turned slowly, his amber eyes locking onto Zar's. "Strange? I'm surrounded by the strongest warriors in the galaxy, and you speak of strange? Their weakness is obvious. Their inability to unite is their downfall." Zar hesitated but said nothing more, though he clearly remained unconvinced. Zorith's confidence was unquestionable. The plan was set, and there was no turning back. The Zorthians had already demonstrated their overwhelming superiority with a small-scale bombing raid, obliterating a human military base with ease. The shockwave alone had flattened entire cities. And yet, as the days passed, Zorith couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. The humans weren't retreating in the same manner that previous species had. They didn't break. They didn't beg for mercy. There was something about them that irritated him, something almost infuriatingly resilient. The command bridge fell silent as the next phase of the operation began. Zorith watched the screen closely. A single human leader had been captured in a raid, President Rowan. His image flickered in the hologram, a man drenched in blood, his face pale, yet his eyes burned with defiance. Zorith's lips curled into a sneer. This is their leader? A frail, bloodied man who thinks he can stand against us? He turned to Lieutenant Zern. Begin the broadcast. Let them see what happens to those who defy the Zorthian Empire. The command room erupted into movement as the transmission was initiated. On Earth, the humans would witness the public execution of their leader. It was meant to demoralize them, to prove beyond any doubt that resistance was futile. As Zora stood there, watching the broadcast unfold, he noticed something odd. President Rowan did not scream. He did not beg. Instead, he stared straight into the camera, eyes cold and defiant, as if daring Zorth to kill him. Zora scoffed. This is the best they can do? Such weak resolve. But as the execution commenced, something about the human reaction unsettled him. The humans didn't panic. They didn't flee. Instead, there were whispers among the ranks, a glimmer of something deeper in their eyes. A quiet understanding that this act, this death, was not the end. Zorth felt a chill crawl up his spine, but he quickly dismissed it. It's just theatrics. This display will break them. As the broadcast ended, Zorth allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but something gnawed at him. Despite his confidence, the alien analyst, Lieutenant Zern, stepped forward once again. Commander, what if the humans are playing a deeper game? We've seen their pattern. They seem to be stalling. Zorth turned sharply, his patience thinning. Enough, Zern! You're overthinking this. They will collapse. Humanity's fate is sealed. Zareth's gaze flickered with an unreadable emotion. He said nothing, but his silence hung in the air, heavy with unspoken doubts. Zoreth dismissed it. Focus on the next step. We've already begun to clean up. Earth is ours. But as the fleet moved into its final position, Zoreth couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were hiding something. Something he couldn't understand. Something far more dangerous than any of them had predicted. The days blurred into one as the Zorthian fleet tightened its grip around Earth, an inevitable outcome in Zoreth's eyes. There was no question, the humans were finished. On the command bridge, the hum of the consoles, the faint glow of the holograms, and the chatter of the officers filled the air, but Zoreth barely noticed. His mind was on the conquest, on Earth's fall. It was supposed to be swift, a clean operation. He had expected a few moments of resistance, perhaps some squabbles among the human leadership, but in the end, the planet would crumble under the weight of the Zorthian military might. And so far it had. Zoreth glanced at the large hollow map of Earth. Nearly every major human city had been decimated. The military forces, disorganized and ill-equipped, had been crushed. Resistance fighters had been caught and executed. The streets were littered with bodies, the cities now silent, their lights flickering out one by one as their power grids failed. The humans had put up a pitiful fight, like insects trying to sting a predator far too large and powerful to notice. Commander, all major cities are under control, Lieutenant Zern reported, his voice calm, devoid of concern. Their militaries have all but collapsed. We've taken several high-ranking officials alive for questioning, and those who remain seem to be hiding in pockets of resistance. Zoreth nodded, allowing a rare smirk to play across his lips. I expected as much. These creatures were never prepared for war on this scale. From the corner of the room, Zar observed the hollow map with a solemn expression. He had grown increasingly uneasy as the operation progressed. There was something about the humans' behavior that didn't add up. It was subtle, but Zar had witnessed it, small, inexplicable patterns in the way the humans responded. Despite their crumbling cities, their lack of unity, they never truly seemed afraid. They resisted in ways that didn't make sense to Zar, and it unsettled him. Commander, we've received reports of human survivors retreating into underground bunkers, Zar interjected. It may be time to consider an all-out offensive to wipe out the last of them. Zoreth waved him off. No need. Let them hide. It's over. They know it's over. They'll come out when we crush their last remnants. We'll deal with them when they're ready to surrender. He turned back to the hollow map, his fingers tracing the lines that marked the destruction of human civilization. The humanity that once boasted of its advanced civilization was now in ruins. Yet, as Zorith observed the reports from the front lines, there was something strange. Something that continued to tug at the edge of his thoughts. There were moments, small but noticeable, when the humans didn't behave like defeated creatures. For instance, there had been reports of human civilians, what was left of them, continuing to fight. No rational creature would fight for the sake of fighting, not when all hope seemed lost. Yet the humans did. They fought with a desperation that bordered on insanity. There were no tactical advantages to what they did. In one instance, a human woman had attempted to destroy one of their battle cruisers with nothing more than a small explosive strapped to her chest. She failed, of course, but the act of self-destruction in such a futile scenario was baffling. Why would they do that? Zar had asked, his tone heavy with confusion. Zorith had dismissed the question as beneath his concern. It's what they do. They are nothing more than desperate animals. Still, the nagging feeling persisted, just beneath the surface of Zorith's arrogance. Commander, Lieutenant Zern's voice broke through Zorith's thoughts. We've intercepted another transmission from Earth. They've announced that they will execute our captured officers publicly tomorrow. It seems they think such gestures will inspire their people. Zorith chuckled darkly. Let them. It will do nothing. Their people are broken. There is no hope left. As the day drew to a close, Zorith allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They were close now, so close to total victory. The human resistance was scattered, disorganized, their leaders either captured or killed. There were no threats left. Earth was theirs. But that night, something changed. The humans, in their desperation, did something unexpected, something that would become their first clue, the first sign that the humans were not as beaten as they appeared. The broadcast began without warning. The capture of one of their highest-ranking generals, General Harkin, was displayed across the public transmission network. Zorith watched as the broadcast played out, a slight amusement tugging at his lips. This was it. The final humiliation for the human species. They had captured one of the best of their kind, and now they would make an example of him. The execution would be broadcasted across the planet, a signal to the remnants of humanity that resistance was futile. But as the camera zoomed in on General Harkin, the expected fear, the panic, the begging for mercy, none of it came. Instead, the human general, battered and bloodied, stood tall. His expression was cold, resolute, unwavering in the face of certain death. There was no despair in his eyes. Zorith watched, momentarily caught off guard. This was not how humans were supposed to behave. As the executioner raised the blade, General Harkin uttered one final word into the camera. Resist. The broadcast ended, and Zorith turned slowly to his officers. There was a moment of silence in the room. That, Zar began, was strange. It's like he didn't fear death at all. Why would he? Enough. Zorith snapped, his arrogance momentarily rattled. The humans are stubborn, yes. But that doesn't change the outcome. This will break them. We have won. Don't allow their theatrics to fool you. But in the back of his mind, a seed of doubt began to grow. The humans weren't acting like beaten creatures. There was something deeper there, something Zorith could not quite grasp. And as the days wore on, that feeling, small and insignificant at first, began to grow. It all seemed too easy, too perfect. Zorith watched the Earth from the command bridge, the planet now a patchwork of fires and smoldering ruins. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled behind his head. The humans were broken. Resistance was all but non-existent. The last holdouts had scattered into the deepest corners of their cities, and their leaders had either been captured or executed. There was nothing left to fight for. Or so he thought. The broadcast of General Harkin's final defiance had barely fazed him. It was all part of the script, he told himself. A final act of desperation. There was no fight left in the humans. Their leaders were either dead or disheartened. But even as Zorith reveled in his supposed victory, something gnawed at him, a whisper of doubt that refused to be silenced. The humans' irrationality, their courage in the face of annihilation, it all seemed wrong. He had dismissed it, of course. Weak species often had bursts of last-ditch defiance. But these humans were different. They kept fighting, even when all hope seemed lost. And it was that very unpredictability that sent a shiver down his spine. But no matter how much he tried to ignore it, Zorith couldn't dismiss the feeling. Something wasn't right. It was the morning after the broadcast of Harkin's death when the first sign of trouble appeared. "Commander," Lieutenant Zern's voice crackled over the comm. "We've detected an anomaly in the perimeter. One of our supply ships has gone dark. It was en route to the surface to deliver final orders to the local human militia." Zorith raised an eyebrow, irritation flashing across his features. "What do you mean, gone dark?" His voice was sharp. "It's not responding to our signals," Zern replied, his tone laced with unease. "We've tried every communication channel, but it's as if the ship just vanished." Zorith turned to his officers. This wasn't a glitch, not a mere communication error. "Send a team to investigate," he ordered, his eyes narrowing. "This is no accident. The humans have to be behind this." Zar stepped forward, his massive form towering over the console. His face was shadowed with concern. "Perhaps we should consider a full-scale operation, Commander. If this is more than just an isolated incident, we might be facing more resistance than we anticipated." Zorith shook his head, though a tinge of doubt remained. "It's just a diversion. They're trying to make us overreact." The communications officer's voice broke through the tension. "Commander, we've received another transmission. It's from Earth's remaining government officials." Zorith's eyes flashed with annoyance. He had no interest in what humans had to say at this point, but the thought of their resistance forces still trying to organize piqued his curiosity. "Put it through," he ordered, motioning toward the screen. The transmission flickered to life. A human officer appeared, his face grim, but resolute. "To the Zorthian invaders," the officer began, his voice crackling with static. "You believe you've won. You think you've broken us. But you haven't. There's more to humanity than your technology can ever comprehend." Zora scoffed, dismissing the transmission with a flick of his hand. "How quaint. They still believe they can resist." But as the officer continued speaking, something in his tone unsettled Zorith. "You've only seen the surface of what we are capable of," the human officer declared. "And you've made a grave mistake in underestimating us. You may have taken our cities, but we're not finished yet. Our real strength comes from something you can't predict." The screen went black. Zorith's face hardened. "This is a distraction. They've been cornered, and now they're grasping at straws." Hours later, as the fleet continued its patrol around the Earth, the atmosphere on the command bridge shifted. What started as a dull unease soon grew into palpable tension. "Commander," the communications officer said, her voice high with alarm, "we're picking up multiple energy signatures from the surface. Unidentified sources. They're not human." Zorith's eyes flashed to the screen. The symbols on the holographic map flickered as unfamiliar patterns appeared. His mind raced, analyzing the data. "Impossible," he muttered. "The humans have no means to launch anything." Suddenly, the ship rocked. A violent jolt surged through the command deck, throwing officers from their stations. "What was that?" Zorith barked, gripping the armrests of his chair. "Energy signatures," the officer shouted. "They're launching something. No, multiple launches. They've activated weapons we couldn't detect before." A deep, ominous rumble echoed throughout the command room as the ship shuddered again. This time, Zorith knew it wasn't just a minor disturbance. Something had shifted. Back on Earth, humanity's true weapon was finally revealed. The so-called primitive humans had hidden their greatest cards well. Beneath the surface of their planet, tucked away in secret military bunkers, were fleets of ships, cloaked, shielded, and powered by technologies Zorith had never anticipated. The humans had stockpiled weapons, hidden deep within the Earth's crust, waiting for the moment to strike. The first wave hit fast and hard. Zorthian ships, countless ones, were ambushed by hidden fleets of human warships, ships Zoratha's fleet had never seen on their scans. They were fast, maneuverable, and equipped with devastating energy weapons that cut through the Zorthian shields like paper. Entire Zorthian warships disintegrated in moments. "How is this possible?" Zorath muttered, his voice now tinged with disbelief. "These humans, they've been hiding this from us." Zar turned to Zorath, his face a mask of astonishment. "It seems we underestimated them." Back on Earth, the resistance was thriving. The primitive humans had hidden entire fleets underground, just as they had concealed weapons capable of tearing through the Zorthian technology. Sleeper agents, hidden within the Zorthian ranks, had infiltrated command centers, feeding false intelligence to the invaders. The war was not over. It had just begun. Zoratha's mind raced as the situation spiraled out of control. The humans had been playing a long game, a game Zorath hadn't even known they were capable of. He turned to Zar, his voice now strained with a frustration he had never known. "How did we miss this? How did we not see it coming?" Zar looked back, the faintest glimmer of regret in his eyes. "We were blinded by our own arrogance. We thought them weak, we thought they were finished." Zorath clenched his fists, watching as his forces were dismantled, one by one. His once mighty fleet was in disarray. And then, for the first time in his life, Zorath realized the depth of his mistake. The humans were not just resilient. They were brilliant. They had outplayed him. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Zorath had always prided himself on his unshakable confidence. He had led countless campaigns, crushed civilizations, and extinguished entire species. Never had he been bested, never had he doubted his own supremacy. But now, as he stared at the carnage unfolding across his fleet, he couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that everything he believed in was crumbling to dust. The humans, those primitive creatures, had outwitted them, outmaneuvered them, and now, as Zoratha's flagship was rocked by yet another direct hit, he felt the very core of his empire trembling. His once indomitable fleet, powerful and vast, was falling apart before his eyes. Human warships, sleek and agile, darted through the wreckage of his forces, firing on all sides, cutting through his ships like a hot knife through butter. The Zorthian armada had been routed, and it was only a matter of time before they were completely overwhelmed. Zoratha's mind raced as the explosions shook his command deck. His officers scrambled to assess the damage, but it was clear, there was no turning back. His flagship, the pride of the Zorthian fleet, had suffered critical damage. The outer hull was buckling under the repeated assaults, and the ship's internal systems were flickering. The humans had done it, had turned the tide of the war with a single, well-executed strike. "Commander, the rear engines have been disabled!" Lieutenant Zern shouted over the comms, his voice laced with panic. "We're losing power across multiple sectors." Zorath gripped the armrests of his chair, his fists tightening. "No," he muttered under his breath. "This can't be happening. We are not finished yet." He turned his gaze to the holomap. His forces had been decimated. Human fleets had emerged from the depths of Earth's atmosphere, launching salvo after salvo of devastating energy weapons. The humans had anticipated every move, every attack. They were everywhere, striking from angles no Zorthian strategist could have predicted. The humans had understood the key to warfare better than Zorath ever could: adaptability. The humans were chaotic, unpredictable, but it was that very unpredictability that had turned them into the perfect adversary. Zorath had underestimated them at every step. On the bridge, Zar stood motionless, his face etched with disbelief. The stoic general had been one of Zoratha's most trusted allies, yet now, even Zar seemed shaken. "We've lost nearly half the fleet," Zar said grimly. "And those are only the ships we know about. The rest could be worse." Zoratha's jaw clenched as he turned to face his general. He had no answers, no explanations. All his carefully laid plans had collapsed like a house of cards. The humans had adapted, had turned their greatest weakness into their most dangerous strength. "There's got to be something we can do," Zorath growled, his eyes wild. Call for reinforcements. We can't let them win. We have to break their will. Find their command center, destroy it, and we will break them. Tsar remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the destruction unfolding outside their ship. Finally, he spoke, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Commander, we have no reinforcements. Our supply lines are cut off. Our forces are scattered across the galaxy, and these humans, they are relentless. They will never stop. We are on the verge of total defeat. Zoratha's head snapped toward his general. The words hit him like a physical blow. You mean we're done? Finished? Not yet, Tsar said quietly. But soon. Unless we do something, unless we think differently, we're finished. A moment of eerie silence followed, broken only by the distant sounds of explosions as the humans continued their relentless assault. Zorath turned back to the holomap. His ships were in disarray. Their weapons were ineffective against the humans' advanced technology, and there was no way to reorganize the fleet in time. Zoratha's gaze shifted, landing on one small cluster of human warships. These ships were different from the others. They weren't as numerous, nor as fast, but their precision was unmatched. They had somehow coordinated their strikes to devastating effect, targeting the weaknesses in his fleet with uncanny accuracy. The humans' efficiency was both terrifying and impressive. They're not just fighting to survive, Zorath muttered to himself. They're fighting to win. As if on cue, a piercing alarm went off. A transmission from Earth. Zorath had no desire to hear it, but the officer's voice was insistent. Commander, they're broadcasting again. The human leaders, this one seems to be an ultimatum. Zoratha's impatience flared, but his curiosity got the better of him. He nodded sharply. Put it through. The holographic screen flickered, and a new transmission appeared. The human officer, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a stoic expression, appeared on the screen. His tone was calm, almost eerily so, but there was no mistaking the confidence in his voice. To the Zorthian invaders, the officer began. You have failed. You have destroyed our cities, taken our people, and tested our limits. But you've also shown us something important. You've shown us that our greatest strength is not in our weapons, not in our technology, but in our will to survive. The officer paused, and Zorath could see the faces of the Zorthian officers behind him, watching intently. You thought you could break us, but you were wrong. We will not yield. We will not surrender. You have lost. And now, we will make sure you never threaten us again. The transmission ended abruptly. Zorath stood frozen, his chest tight. He couldn't understand it. How could they still have this kind of spirit? How could they still believe they could win? His officers murmured around him, their uncertainty palpable. Tsar stood motionless, his gaze unwavering as he processed the message. For the first time, Zorath felt a true sense of dread, something he hadn't felt in decades. Humanity's resolve was not just defiance, it was the embodiment of everything Zorath had misunderstood about them. He had seen weakness where there was none, and now he was paying the price for it. The humans had learned the most important lesson of warfare. It wasn't about winning every battle, it was about winning the war. Their strength was not in numbers or raw power, but in their ability to adapt, to evolve, and to surprise. And now, it was too late for Zorath. The Zorthian fleet was finished, and all that remained was for him to face the consequences. Zorath stood at the command bridge of the shattered flagship, his once pristine uniform tattered and stained, his hands gripped tightly around the cold metal railing. The ship was all but crippled. The once mighty Zorthian fleet had been reduced to smoldering wreckage, scattered across the void of space like the remnants of a broken dream. As he gazed out into the infinite expanse, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the galaxy pressing in on him. He had always believed that the Zorthians were destined to rule. The stars themselves had seemed to bow to their might. And yet, in the span of a few short days, his empire had been brought to its knees by a species he had once dismissed as weak, primitive, and doomed to extinction. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had defeated the Zorthians. The thought made his stomach churn. Zorath had never been one to back down from a challenge, but now, as his fleet crumbled and his soldiers were taken captive, he found himself questioning everything he had ever known about war, about strength, and about humanity. They had outsmarted him, outmaneuvered him, and outlasted him. The humans had turned the very tide of the war against them, using unpredictability as their weapon. And he had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. Hours earlier, Zorath had watched in disbelief as the last remnants of his forces were either captured or destroyed. The human resistance had overwhelmed the Zorthian troops with wild tactics, using guerrilla warfare, sleeper agents, and unconventional methods that had completely dismantled the Zorthian strategy. What had begun as a swift, efficient invasion had become a humiliating rout. The final blow had come when the remaining Zorthian ships attempted to escape the system, only to be intercepted by human warships emerging from the shadows of Earth's moon. The humans had anticipated every move, every retreat, and had struck with surgical precision. Zorath had watched helplessly as his ships were picked off one by one, their systems overridden by the humans' superior hacking technology. And now Zorath, once the proud commander of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, was a prisoner on the very ship he had once commanded. "Commander Zorath," came the voice of a human officer over the comm, pulling him from his thoughts. Zorath turned to see a human captain standing in the doorway of the command room, flanked by 2 guards. His uniform was simple but well-worn, his face hard and resolute. Zorath could tell that this man had seen battle. But there was no arrogance in his demeanor, no triumph, just quiet confidence, tempered with the weariness of a leader who had fought and won a long war. Zorath didn't respond immediately, instead eyeing the man with disdain. The human captain, unfazed, took a step forward, his gaze meeting Zorath's. "You've lost, Commander," the human captain said calmly. "Your fleet is gone, your empire is crumbling, and the galaxy will never be the same again. You may not understand it yet, but humanity's victory here today is the beginning of something much greater." Zorath sneered. "Victory?" he spat. "What victory? Your species is nothing more than a group of unpredictable, emotional creatures. You may have won this battle, but your war is far from over." The captain's expression softened slightly. "It's not about winning every battle, Zorath. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how many times you're knocked down. You may have thought you were fighting a weak species, but you didn't understand what makes humanity dangerous. We don't just fight for survival, we fight for something greater. We fight because we believe in something bigger than ourselves." Zorath's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won because you're a little more resilient than we thought?" The human captain nodded, but there was no arrogance in his response, only a quiet, resolute understanding. "Resilience is part of it. But more than that, we fight because we know we're capable of adapting, of learning from our mistakes. You underestimated us, Commander. You thought you could break us, but you didn't know what we were truly capable of." Zorath clenched his fists, his anger simmering beneath the surface. How had this happened? How had his empire, his fleet, been so thoroughly destroyed by a species he had once considered beneath notice? In the days that followed, Zorath found himself under guard, confined to a small cell aboard a human warship. The same species he had once looked down upon now controlled his fate. His captors were not cruel, but neither were they merciful. They had no interest in exacting revenge, only in securing their victory and ensuring that the Zorthians would never threaten humanity again. Zorath spent his days in silence, his thoughts a maelstrom of confusion and regret. He could hear the human soldiers outside his cell, their voices calm and steady, as though they had been preparing for this moment all along. It was as if they had known, deep down, that the tide of war would turn, and they had simply waited for the right moment to strike. Humanity's victory over the Zorthian Empire had not been the result of brute force alone, it had been the result of their capacity to adapt, to evolve in the face of adversity. They had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. And Zorath, in all his arrogance, had failed to see it. A few weeks later, Zorath found himself standing before a council of human leaders. He was no longer the commander of a vast fleet, but a prisoner, an alien to be studied, perhaps even a symbol of humanity's triumph. He stood in silence, his posture stiff, as the humans debated what to do with him. One of the human leaders, a woman with dark hair and sharp eyes, addressed him directly. "Commander Zorith, you've lost. But we offer you a chance, an opportunity to work with us, to help us rebuild, and to ensure that no other species ever tries to conquer Earth again." Zorith's eyes flashed with disdain. "You would have me help you? After all that has happened? You have no idea what you're asking." The woman remained calm. "We understand that it's difficult to accept. But you are the one who saw firsthand what humanity is capable of. We don't need your technology or your weapons, we need your knowledge, your insight. The galaxy is changing, Commander, and humanity will play a key role in shaping it." Zorith stood in silence for a long moment, his mind swirling with disbelief. The humans had won, not just through force, but through something far more elusive, their ability to adapt, to grow stronger in the face of defeat. It was something he had never truly understood, and it had been his undoing. As the council meeting drew to a close, Zorith was left to ponder the future. The galaxy had been irrevocably altered by humanity's victory. They would no longer be the weak, backward species he had once believed them to be. And he would have to live with the consequences of his arrogance. Zorith's new reality was humbling. He had become part of the very species he had sought to destroy, working alongside them, learning from them, and in some small way, becoming part of their future. As he sat in the quiet of his quarters, a thought lingered in his mind, one that he could never have entertained before. Humanity's resilience, their unpredictability, their unwavering determination, those were the qualities that had led to their victory. And now, he understood what they had known all along: to truly conquer a species, you had to understand not just their technology, or their military power, but their spirit.